You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld, and I am so happy to have my two guests today, although I wish the circumstances were very different. Dana Chisnell and Christian Crumlish. Thank you for both joining us. It's great to see you and have you on the podcast.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Nice to be back.
Well, folks, you probably know Christian and Dana one way or another. They're both renowned authors and leaders in our field, and both have made a pretty substantial and important impact in what maybe I'll call the civic design space, working with the federal government here in the United States, and have had some amazingly good experiences, but also went through some tough things since the Trump administration came into power, and that regime's DOGE-ification of a lot of people doing a lot of really good work for the citizens and others who reside in the United States. So we're going to get into that. We're going to spend some time talking about this past year, and then we'll get into where this is going, and there may be some pretty hopeful signs here. But let's get started. Dana, you are coming up on an anniversary, or maybe it's even this week, of 1 year. And what were you doing a year ago?
A year ago, I was resigning from my job as the Executive Director of Customer Experience at the Department of Homeland Security. After the pandemic, and I was telling people what I was up to as head of customer experience for DHS, I would get a couple of responses. One was, "That sounds really hard."
Mm-hmm.
And the other was, "What are you thinking?" And what I was thinking when I said yes, finally, after saying no a lot, was that this was an opportunity to advance design in maybe one of the hardest spaces on the planet, and seeing a window where I would have the support of leadership from my boss all the way up to the president to get design and research a seat at the table and to be taken seriously as a way to make government better and to deliver better services for the public.
And then you resigned. And I want to come back to that. Christian, did you have a similar trajectory? What were you doing a year ago?
A year ago, I was in the second week of a sort of 5-week drip kind of torturing of my team, gaslighting of us, and kind of experiencing something similar to like what it feels like for like a hostile takeover. Imagine like you're at a company and there's new owners and they say a little bit of like marketing speak, but all their behavior looks like they're planning to lay everybody off and bring in their bros instead. And at the same time, combined with all your alarm bells going off from all your training, the training you just had to redo a couple of weeks earlier in detecting an insider threat and what your ethics rules are and how you're supposed to safeguard the data and all the public trust that you've been cleared, on behalf of the government. So I had a team, 15 people, product managers. I was running the product chapter of 18F, which was a 10-year-old internal consulting organization that grew out of a lot of that post-Obamacare realization that government procurement and web competence was not adequate back then. And there's been it's an ongoing story, of course. I should make it clear that like I'm following in Dana's footsteps. Dana, like I in the sense that Dana and I are friends, and we've talked about such things, and she once helped connect the dots on a campaign that was looking for UX research that made a big difference and things like that, where I was like a link in the chain of that connection. So I was aware of the work she was doing on ballot, design. So I'm a fan of like a follower as much as anything else. And I made my way I had civic tech as a goal in my life, a thing I wanted to do. I had 18F on my bucket list. And when I was between jobs more than once, I asked around if this might be a good time and or whatever. Sometimes I was told no, high drama right now, not a good time. And then the planets aligned, and I had my dream job. But it turned into in that 5 week period, the I'd say like a different aspect of leadership I haven't had to deal with much, which
Mm,
is like managing a team through crisis and kind of a hostile situation. Um, I kept going to these nautical metaphors of like, they've taken over the ship and locked us in the hold, but we got to get another boat before we jump overboard, that sort of thing. And in February, they at the end of February, and Friday night at midnight, they sent out an email laying off our whole team. And the 18F, by firing us all at once, they inadvertently preserved our unity really well. And so, and 18F folks are like super achieving, organized do-gooders. So the next day
mhm,
we had an all hands meeting with alumni and like DC media people advising us on stuff and think not media people, people with advice about how to deal with media and strategists. And immediately people were making websites and building mutual aid organizations and planning communication strategies. And I think over time, trying to make a space for other less technical, less communication savvy feds who are being affected as well, up and down. People in our position sail in at the top of the ladder because they're trying to pay us something like a tech salary, and with jobs titles and level rankings that people work their whole careers to get, and some aren't even on a track to ever get that. And so in some ways we were aware that as much as we could make noise and draw attention to ourselves, that we're kind of at a privileged end of the sliver, and we were trying to shed as much light to everybody else, all the other organizations that are being decimated, the people being thrown out of their jobs, all the probationers who have been moved into the new job they've been training for and aspiring to for years, but because it's a cheat technicality where technically, if you read the rules a certain way, those people are vulnerable, just getting numbers by just getting rid of them all at once. Anyway, I don't mean to go off on a rant, but all this stuff was going on. That's what was going on a year ago.
You were actually let go by 18F, and as was
Well,
everyone else,
18F
but
was
well,
destroyed.
destroyed.
I was let go by TTS, I guess technically, or
Okay.
the
by
Good.
Trump
technology
and Musk and his
transformation.
and their minions. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
So,
yeah.
and you stayed as, sounds like a horrible 5 week period where you were there to protect your people until there were no people. None of you were there. Now, Dana, you left under a different circumstance. You resigned. What was the straw that broke your
Yeah.
back?
So part of my job as being head of customer experience for this giant department, which has 8 major agencies within it, right? Ones that you might actually like, including FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, um, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, uh, and but it also includes ICE and Customs and Border Protection, Secret Service, Coast Guard, the Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency. Um, I'm leaving somebody out. I can't think of who it
It's
is. Oh,
big.
TSCA.
Yeah.
TSA. Um, so giant organization. I am the head of this in the headquarters. There are teams within most of those agencies. But my part of my job was also head of service delivery lead. And when the Trump administration came in, one of the first things that happened was that they issued dozens, like 100 executive orders over the course of the first week,
Hmm.
including dozens the first 24 hours after the president was inaugurated. One of those was an executive order that there was a combination of them. One declared that there were only 2 genders, male and female, and another eliminated all the diversity, equity, inclusion programs, which also ordered that all of the websites, digital services, apps uh, be scrubbed of all references to anybody who's not white, male, and Christian. And I looked at my friends and my family, and I morally could not erase their existences. And so I refused to carry out that order. And while I tried to get my boss to fire me, he would not do that. He recognized that I was experiencing moral injuries, but uh, urged me to resign. There was a lot of pressure from my peers also to just go quietly and not make a fuss, because it would draw attention to my 40 fed team, and the 20 or 25 contractors who worked with us, putting a target on them. But the truth is that it was just a matter of time before that team was eliminated. And a couple of months ago, in fact, it was eliminated. Many people left and found other places to land. Uh, some people stayed and moved to different places in DHS or in the federal government. But the team that I built does that I spent 3 years building
Hmm.
doesn't exist anymore.
Um, you know, there's some interesting connections to or parallels with the private sector, and then sometimes they break down when you compare your public sector experience to the private sector. So the thing I think of immediately is like my sense of the current administration is that they are practicing what I would call smash and grab economics. So just disrupt, put your hand in people's pockets and pull what you can out before they notice. And, certainly from a policy perspective, when you eliminate policies or you deregulate to the point where there are no controls, bad actors can do all kinds of things that they want to do and move quickly before the rest of us realize it. But in the public sector, I'm trying to understand. I don't know if you know, but you probably have more theories than I do. What is the rationale for pulling down all this infrastructure that is there? Not, I mean, we can say to serve citizens, and that doesn't necessarily evince a real emotional reaction from many people. But when you start saying to serve veterans, well, then it starts to hit in a way, to serve seniors, to serve children. It means a lot to people when they probably think about it. So why did this administration feel so motivated to do what it did?
I'll tell you what I think. I mean, I just don't know if it's
It's
what it
all
has to be in the US
theories. It's all
exactly.
theories all the way
I
down.
mean, I think it's straightforward. If you read Project 2025, that it's
They
a
wrote it all
plan.
down.
There's a desire to weaken the organs of government that they believe benefit or are part of a liberal or progressive or left wing or woke or whatever the current, scare terminology is for like trying to make the world better and care about other people and stuff like that. So they they already have a shared worldview among themselves and trying to show some respect for other people's lived identities, um, that says that the government is infested with left-wing ideology, and to them, the use of being asked to give your pronouns or to describe the view behind you on a video call because someone on your team might not be cited, or someone watching the video later might not be cited. Um, to them, that's if you look at, and probably neither of you spend a lot of time wallowing in right-wing social media. I don't myself, but I believe, and the parts of it that I've come in contact with would just like essentially mock and caricature that kind of thing as like weird social engineering that makes normal people feel awkward, and like they've got new etiquette they have to do, and it's all for like just so like I don't know anybody who's blind, or I don't know why I have to be told how to pronounce someone's name, or like there's just again there's an ideological point of view that finds all that stuff really burdensome, and therefore they believe that it's like a highly politicized environment already. So what we see as them injecting right-wing politics into what was a fairly neutral bureaucracy, honestly, I think in their worldview is an attempt to fight back against something. And I don't agree with them, and I don't think what they're doing is right. I think it's stupid, and they're doing it poorly and making lots of mistakes. And even the thing, I mean, some things are on purpose, and some things are just dropping the eggs on the ground. But I'll give you an example, like from an ideological point of view. Several times, we were trying to cope. So we were trying to employ our people, keep them involved, and like do our 18F survived other, administrations that
including
before.
Trump
So there
one.
was,
Yeah.
right. So there was a belief that we could still have the shared goal of making stuff work better and put politics aside, and make some actual advantages. So the head of our engineering team, Heather, was trying to make sure people were put onto projects or made available for things. And at one point, she was asked whether she had somebody available for a certain project, and she put forward the best engineer on the team for that. But the best engineer on the team for that was not a man and not a white man. And say they said, no, we'd actually like one of these people. And they had a list because they'd done their little 15-minute interviews with everybody. And it was just one of the white male engineers. She wanted, and it didn't matter that some of them had no experience with that stack or it was, and now you might say, well, I mean, any of us would say, well, that's weird. You're literally excluding all the non-white males, and isn't that obviously just reintroducing segregation or something like that? But if you got
Yes.
one of them to tell you honestly what they thought they were doing, and it's no less offensive, I'm just gonna and please don't make it sound like this is something I think, but in their view, like affirmative action or whatever the wokeism, whatever they think there is, has like advantaged everybody except for white males. So nobody's credentials are legitimate except white males. Everybody else has been boosted, and you have to discount them. It's a bizarro world thing that it's the opposite of reality in many ways. But if you walk into like a team of people who all believe that, and that's what they all say over drinks at night, and that's why they were recruited by Musk or by the what's his name, Teal or whatever, to be part of the squad. That's it. It's just like frat bro mentality. It's not very sophisticated, and it's easily susceptible to this kind of like white male grievance culture. And
Well,
that we just got to be on the blunt end of that.
what's interesting, well, it's all interesting, but what stands out for me is you only use the word bureaucracy once just now. And I would have thought they would have, I mean, I think they tried to couch a lot of this in terms of destroying inefficient bureaucracy, but this is like the other connection that I always see, and I like to maybe dig into a little bit with parallels between the public and private sectors. The
Mm.
idea of running the government like a business, and like my counter to that has always been, I don't know, do you ever try to get something out of Comcast? Um, so did they really? Did that figure much in the efforts they were making, or was it really just pretty brazenly a form of digital ethnic and gender cleansing?
Well, so I started my federal career in the founding cohort of the U.S. Digital Service, which this administration replaced with the U.S. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. And the tagline for DOGE had been, and still is, such as it exists, is that they were on the lookout for waste, fraud, and abuse, that they wanted to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, that there were massive inefficiencies and thousands of bureaucrats who are ineffective at delivering services to the public. But in practice, what happened really was uh, much more like the kind of smash and grab that you described, Lou. And that was like to show up with a bunch of people who don't actually know anything about how government works, had no knowledge of the goodness or poorness of government technology and data integrity, with zero respect for protecting the privacy of citizens and non-citizens'
Hmm.
data, and really just showed up to make life miserable for thousands of people and to exploit whatever. resources they could get their hands on, including, it turns out, personal private data from the Social Security Administration and other agencies that nobody knows exactly where it is now and who's using it.
It's
So like,
training Grok and Palantir, I'm pretty sure. It was a data
Mhm.
heist. Well, I mean, we were told at the time they brought their own servers into government buildings
they did.
and then set up cloud, servers and exfiltrated private government data, public data, but private information.
Yeah.
It was theft of the sovereign data of the United States. I hate to say it, and you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube either.
Mhm.
No, no.
Now, and they paid lip service to the old, oh, run the government like a business malarkey. I mean, we've heard that forever. And both parties also have, their efficiency drives every time, and they find out that, sure,
Sure.
large bureaucratic organizations, like no offense to any big company, but, I often say Procter and Gamble because I don't know anybody there, but it's like
Pick a bank, any
anything with seven,
bank.
8, 9, 10 levels of management
Yeah.
and regulations and HR and lawyers is complex, right? I mean, it's bureaucratic, so everything doesn't move as fast as like a guy living on pizza in Palo Alto who just dropped out of college can like make a widget that breaks the law until they can lobby to change the law. Like that's not how you get to work in government. So
No.
yeah, and I'm sorry to keep ranting, but at the top of the so I think there was great cynicism among the leadership. They knew exactly what they're doing. This is just an excuse for a bust out in a mafia sense, to just like bust something out, take all the value out of it, and leave it broken for the next generation. I think they did that. I also think they recruited a bunch of young, naive fellas who
Yeah.
actually did think the usual thing that, to be honest, a lot of even civic tech people famously walked in the door thinking, why don't we just do it this way? And then learned like there's reasons in Chesterton's fence and like meeting people where they are. And, there's a whole learning curve. And so that was not fun to be lectured at by a bunch of twerps in the exact, making all the exact mistakes that they're making because you made them and all the other
Yeah.
people who made them in the last 10 years also. And to be told like, anyway, I'm not going to, I made my point.
Well, Christian, there's no such thing as expertise, but that's a whole nother that's a whole nother
Different
thing,
discussion.
right?
Um, but I would argue that the government should not be run like a business. It is fundamentally a different thing. Government does things that business cannot do. And to think that you can run the government like you run a business. I would like an example of a high functioning, well delivering business that government maybe should be modeled after. I haven't encountered one yet. Maybe somebody out there listening works for one. But government exists because there are things that humans need that cannot be provided by the private sector.
And where profit doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right, and it's mixed. I mean, I'm a product manager now, or a product leader, whatever I am, and that's in some and if I'm doing that in government, then I myself are part of a narrative that's like sort of running government, sort of like a business, because product management came from the private sector, right? They're not really products, right? They're services, and
Oh,
so, but
likewise. I mean,
how, right? Yeah.
talking about customers, for example. I think it's super awkward to be
Yeah.
talking about customers in
But what,
government.
but
It's
but
not
what I will s-
transactional.
but I will say, and to make a little bit of a defense of myself or my career, is that it's not wrong. I mean, the kernel of truth is that market discipline, it's kind of like war forces medical advances. Like market discipline forces innovations in process, in workflow, in certain kinds of transactional systems. And there are advantages that can be, like maybe putting your data in the cloud was going to first be adopted by the private sector, but there are reasons why the public sector should look into that too. So, there is a flow of methods across the two sectors. It probably is not just a one-way flow if you look closely enough, and the academia is in there somewhere too. But that part's just like, okay, that's part of that's sort of true. But when it's ideologically, like it just becomes sort of like a slogan of like running the government like a kitchen table, like as if your
Kitchen
mortgage is
table
the national
economics.
debt,
Yeah.
and we need a sales guy for the president or something, like all that kind of stuff I think is very wrong-headed. And mostly because, and I don't want to probably go too far down this road, but all of these like private versus public, 100% laissez-faire capitalism versus 100% command and control communism. Like none of them exist in any
They
pure
never
form.
have.
And every large country, every modern government has a mix of things they do, like their militaries are mostly command and control, and then other things are even shopped out to vendors or done completely in the private sector, and a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a role for, but I think Dana's earlier point is true, is that like the government inherently does things that the private sector will not do because they are not profit oriented. And therefore, if you try to squeeze everything through the filter of doing it the way the private sector does things, that's actually a recipe for impoverishing the public sector and just leaving the public good on the table because it can't pay for itself transactionally.
Yeah, I have a theory, and I just like you're two people I'd love to air it out with, but I'm going to do it briefly in a moment. We should first take a quick break. Everyone, you're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. We're talking with Dana Chisnell and Christian Crumlish. We will be right back. Hey, it's Lou. We've got another conference coming up naturally. This one is the, I believe, 7th edition of Advancing Research. It's taking place virtually March 10th and 11th. As always, a great program. This one's a little different in that we think researchers really need to hear some wisdom from people who've been through things before and have a lot of experience because, man, these are tough times and we could really use a pat on the back and some help from people who are wise. So we've got some really wise people on the program. You may have heard of some of them, folks like Steve Krug, Dana Chisnell, Sam Ladner, Jared Spool, Laura Klein, and many more. That's just a piece of the program. We've also got those meaty case studies that are the center of the program. It's all taking place virtually. And by the way, we've dropped our prices. I should mention that. But virtual, March 10th and 11th. I hope you'll be there. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm talking with Christian Crumlish, Dana Chisnell. I'm Lou Rosenfeld, and I promised a quick theory. Oh my God, how am I going to do this quickly? So there's not a time I don't think about the pace layer model that Stewart Brand came up with, and that the role of government in many respects is to be that inner core or anchor that slows down the kind of highly fluid dynamic changes that the private sector brings to us. And that's okay. You need to have the slow food to go along with the fast food. That's one part of my theory. The other part is that you need to have, in an era where private sector organizations consolidate and get larger and larger and larger, you need to have a countervailing force in the public sector that is big enough and owned by the citizens as stockholders, in effect, to counter the abuses of large private sector organizations. I don't know. I mean, it feels like what your work was doing was trying to both deliver the slow services that countervail and kind of conserve to counter some of the abuses that the sort of unbridled capitalist approach we seem to be moving toward is doing, as well as to kind of counter the big organizations out there that are just getting so powerful. Am I close based on your experience?
Sort of. I mean, I would argue that a perceived slow pace layer actually is slow, relatively speaking, for a couple of reasons. One is that there is fundamental research that happens that government does or sponsors that the private sector exploits greatly to its own benefit. In fact, all of the technology that we are using today to do this podcast came out of some government project originally and is ultimately the subject of some standard or platform that came out of a government agency.
Mm-hmm.
A function that government also serves is as a check to protect the residents of this country. And so when you eliminate oversight like the Federal Trade Commission or the Federal Communications Commission, or you got the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, um, this leaves individuals and groups of people seriously vulnerable to private sector forces that need to be held in check. Uh, Otherwise, it would just all end up being insanely exploited.
So if I'm a designer, product person, whatever our sort of ilk, whatever our we call ourselves or will be calling ourselves in the years to come, whether I was DOGE-ified or I was hoping maybe to have a future in the public sector, where do you see those opportunities in the years to come to be a countervailing force for hopefully good?
I actually think there's a lot of opportunity in the public sector right now, including in the federal government. There are pockets of good things that are actually happening that you can get good things done and serve constituencies that you care about. But the I see a couple of spaces where folks who want to do good and are part of the diaspora uh, are showing up. And one of those is state and local government. States that have been desperate in many cases for talent are now inviting that talent in. And there's a lot available. And and though folks have been fired or riffed or disenchanted at the federal level, they still want to serve the public, and so they're going to work for state teams. The other is there are, 1,000 flowers blooming on new consulting organizations, new nonprofits forming, on lots of efforts around looking at what will the future of government look like.
Hmm.
Uh, I think we can all agree that there are lots of inefficiencies, that there are lots of frustrations. And to your observation, Lou, like there are things about government that are slow. Um, and some of the things that slow government down are actually there to protect people, to protect your
Yeah, slow is
privacy,
not bad necessarily.
right? So how do you retain those things that protect people or restore those things that protect people, but overcome the other parts of the bad parts, the red tape parts of bureaucracy that don't further those causes and feel extra crufty. So there's a lot of exploration in those spaces. And Christian, I wonder if you're seeing something similar or different.
I think we're seeing the same kinds of things. One thing I mentioned the 18F sort of there was a diaspora. We were a force ghost, they struck down the body, and then it turned out that all the people were the same people the next day. We realized they can stop paying us, but we could still be 18F or do 18F. There's Alt 18F now, 18F.org. We put the whole 18F site back up again when they pulled it down. We put up all the repositories again that they pulled down. It was all the public's property anyway. Um, it's a community of people that are a lot of them doing new things, organ building organizations, thinking about the future, planning conferences, stuff like that. And I'd keep your eyes peeled for some things like that. I would say to people who were interested in civic tech and then went, oh no, like what's happening, that you should think of it as a community of like-minded people. There's jobs. The jobs, as Dana said, are all over the place and will be in new places in the future. But it's also a bunch of people, and being connected to those people has definitely been a part of my path. Um, there's definitely there's a highway between UX and civic tech. I mean, there's more to civic tech than UX, right? Because I'm a
Mm.
product manager, we've got engineers, we've got other roles. that's a whole other conversation, Lou, about the future of these roles, as you know. But I mean, um, but I'd say that a lot of the values that brought people into UX, and for some people who've now grappled with UX in the private sector and found that their values are not that the balance of I would like to make money, but I don't know, but I also wanted to do something good. That's not weighing out for some people the way it used to. And I think that civic tech is attractive for many of the same reasons. And equally has then things where you're like, oh, but this is hard for, like it's not just all, candy canes. The one thing I'd say, and like the point about, well, now there's maybe more job opportunities at other levels of government is absolutely true. I'm working for a vendor now, so I'm in the public sector, but I'm working for the VA, so I'm serving the public in a way that I felt I had sworn to do, and I didn't really want them to stop me from being able to do that. Um, uh, so you're squeezing the balloon a little bit, the
Hmm.
balloon animal. It's like the needs haven't changed. The same need,
Mm.
you could fire everybody. You still need to like stop to help people during a flood. You still need to like give people a way to use the web to sign up for the whatever thing. And the people who know how to do those things and know how to meet those needs are still here. And maybe it's plus or minus some people. Lots of people, not it's not a perfect system, but eventually the supply and demand will find each other in some way. Um, I think though that people who've built things and then seen them torn down or thrown away. Sometimes you could say, well, we'll just come back and build again. And sometimes that is the path. You come back later and have to start over, but now there's a memory of what it was like before. But I think other people are thinking, how do you build anti-fragile things? How do you build things that aren't so easy to throw away,
Yeah.
or that when you attack them, they get stronger? Other people are out there saying, I'm done with half measures. I don't want to argue that we should make it easier for people to reapply and we should like pre-fill in some of their forms and not make them say the same thing over and over. Let's make it so they don't have to apply at all. We know what their benefits are supposed to be. Let's send them a check. That's my new position. And like let them fight me on that one. So it's like it's a resetting for some people of like, well, if I can't have that, what do I really want? Like I thought I was going to make incremental change under the old system, and I didn't love it, but I was there to help it make better, and I got my reasons. Then they didn't even let me do that. So maybe I have bigger ambitions now to make a whole better
Yeah.
system. I think there's some people. So I'd keep eyes out for new organizations, new structures, new roles that didn't exist before, new ways of working that aren't called a business or a government. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of entry ramps to that highway you're talking about, Christian. And it's not just where do I look, but it's also how do I think about what I want to do and what kind of society I want to do it in. And maybe a good place to wrap it is that yes, a lot of the public sector moves slowly, and that's a good thing. But I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, Christian, is sometimes we try to make change slowly and incrementally, and other people aren't, and we can't let them race ahead and move the goalposts continually in one direction. Maybe we need to be a little more, I don't want to use the word extreme, but well, push the goalposts in the other direction, like you're saying. Why do people have to register for what they already are entitled to? As a great example. Well, we could go on a lot longer. Gosh, and maybe if you're both up for it, we'll have you back. But I really appreciate you both joining me today to talk about something even a year later that's still painful and raw. So thank you for that. That's not easy to do, but thank you for also helping just kind of paint a picture of how the public sector works and how UX can work within it, moving fast, moving slow, and finally giving us a little bit of a reset as we look forward to hopefully some really better times and better experiences that the public sector can deliver. So thank you for that. Before we wrap up, I do want to remind you you're supposed to bring gifts for our listeners. So briefly, what'd you bring us? Let's start with you, Christian.
Well, I was recently learned about an organization from a good friend of mine, Dan Brodnitz, who just took a sabbatical from his job as an executive at LinkedIn. And among the things he's focused on right now is advising this organization called the University of Global Health Equity, which is based in Kigali, Rwanda. and which just, I think, this past week graduated its first class. So that's a case of something that, an organization that is trying to both be innovative and meet needs, and connects to our conversation in a sense that I think civic tech doesn't always mean working for your own national government, but just helping to build, organizations and infrastructures that help the common good in any way you can.
I like that. I like that you use the word infrastructure. We are always talking about how we love our highways here in the U.S. Well, that's public sector delivered infrastructure. Why not health services, et cetera, et cetera? Dana, what about you?
So, when I was growing up, I was a Girl Scout. I hope there are other Girl Scouts in the audience as well. And I learned recently that while I have not been a member for a while, that Girl Scouts USA has openly included transgender and non-binary kids in its membership for quite a while. And so it is Girl Scout cookie time. It's almost always Girl Scout cookie time from my point of view. But there is a fabulous list of Girl Scout youth who are selling cookies that we're going to add a link to the show notes where you can order cookies from kids all over the country who span the spectrum of gender identity. And uh, it's a really inspiring list. The descriptions for each kid include like how their troop will spend the money from the cookies, and there's some really wonderful projects out there, from field trips to supporting homeless youth.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm getting pretty hungry. It's almost dinner time here. So I think this is a good time to break. And again, thank you both so much for joining us on the Rosenfeld Review. It's been great to have you. Look forward to seeing you both again.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Hey, it's Lou. Thank you for listening to the latest Rosenfeld Review podcast. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to pop me an email, lou@rosenfeldmedia.com, tell me what you thought. Better yet, leave me the hell alone and post a review on your favorite podcast platform. Please feed the algorithm. It really does make a difference. We want to get the word out. If you like the word, give us a hand. And while I'm asking you for favors, don't forget, buy books. Support your favorite local independent publisher. We happen to be one, rosenfeldmedia.com. All those great UX books are there. So, thanks again.